My husband stole my college savings and used it to pay for his new car, then asked for more, and the first thing I remember is the sound the pen made when the bank manager clicked it, one tiny nervous tick that sounded like a cricket in a jar. That sound is fused to the memory of the word authorized, which is ridiculous because nothing about what happened had my authorization, unless you count the blind permission you give when you fall in love with someone and hand them the spare keys to every part of your life. I wish this were an exaggeration. I wish I had a neat moral to offer up front. What I have instead is a knot of embarrassment, anger, a little grief, and a painfully clear view of the version of me who believed we meant safe. I'm Marcus, 34. Public library tech specialist in a mid-sized city with a river that pretends it's the ocean every time the wind is dramatic. I am the kind of guy who alphabetizes spices and believes in the quiet holiness of keeping promises. I married Theo 2 years ago in a courtyard strung with cafe lights and optimism. He arrived late to our first coffee date and somehow left early from our marriage, just not before he took something I'd been building since I was 20, since the day I decided that even if my parents could only help with a smile and a casserole, I could engineer my way back to school on my own dime. Back to school someday, I told myself while shelving books after closing or fixing the free printer the city bought in 1999, or saying try turning it off and on again with the patience of a saint who has done the reading. I put $20 away when it was all I could spare, $100 on months when kindness and utility bills left me room. I opened a dedicated savings account and named it grad school because names matter. That number was a small, stubborn lighthouse in my banking app, steady, brighter each month. I could see the future in it. I could see my desk at midnight, a cup of tea growing cold next to a half-written literature review, the exhaustion you choose because it leads you somewhere you want to go. Theo knew this about me. He knew because I told him on our third date, the one where he admitted he was terrified of turning 30 with nothing to show for it but a drawer full of concert wristbands and a scar on his chin from a moped. He had this way of making his failures sound charming, like misprinted postcards from a life you admire even if you wouldn't mail it yourself. "You're so organized," he said that night, like he was naming a star. "You believe in later." I'm not used to later, but I like that you do. I liked that he liked it. That should have been my first red flag. I mistook approval for alignment. But I did what people in love do. I gave him my stories and then my spare key and then the little paper envelope with the extra debit card the bank sent. "For groceries," I said. "For emergencies," I said. "Because we're married," I said, which felt as good in my mouth as peppermint. The car started as a joke. His car, technically a car-shaped collection of apologies, had been threatening to give up since spring. It rattled like a maraca stuffed with wrenches. He named it Enid because he said she complained like a librarian, which I pretended to find funny. Every week we had a new episode, the check engine light as the recurring villain, a heroic jump start on a rainy Thursday, a tire whose sole purpose was to flirt with nails. We could have kept nursing her along if Theo had been gentle, if he had accepted that a car that old shouldn't be asked to run like a golden retriever across state lines every other weekend for DJ gigs that barely covered the gas. But if Theo had possessed the capacity to be gentle with anything, we wouldn't be here. The day the story tilts is a Tuesday with polite weather. I'm eating a tuna sandwich at the staff desk because the break room smells like microwaved Brussels sprouts and betrayal. A number I don't recognize calls. I let it go to voicemail because we're replacing the library's entire fleet of public computers next month and my list of tiny things to worry about is a proud skyscraper. The same number calls again. I answer, rehearsing the library is not your customer service hotline voice and meet Mr. Parsons, who says he's calling from our branch bank to verify a high-value transfer. "It's a courtesy call, Mr. Wolf," he says, husbanding syllables the way men in suits do when they'd like you to be grateful for the bad news. "We just want to make sure you're comfortable with the transaction initiated this morning from your joint account ending in 2014. I blink like I'm buffering. "Which joint account?" "We have one household checking account with a balance that looks like it would blush if you stared at it too long. My grad school savings is mine, separate, sealed, the money equivalent of a hope chest." "The account labeled grad school," he says, and I hear the pen in his hand click. The transfer is in the amount of $27,000. There are rooms that tilt. There are floors that develop a slope because a sentence made gravity drunk. That isn't possible, I say, but it already is. Data is faster than denial. There should be dual authorization required for transfers over 5,000. I remember the intake meeting when I signed that paper, my careful no to convenience. I remember telling Theo later why, not because I didn't trust him, but because boundaries are architecture, not fences. Yes, Mr. Parsons says, and the authorization was provided. The next thing he says lands like a barbell on my sternum. From your husband. We clarify. We walk through dates, logins, devices. He is careful, and I am furious in that quiet way that makes your gums go cold. He tells me that Theo is an authorized user on the savings account because he appeared at a branch with our marriage certificate last month and requested the addition. It is technically allowed. Spousal addition, the packet calls it, as if matrimony outweighs math. We sent a letter to your home address, he says, and I see it, the fat white envelope on our dining table under the Trader Joe's flyer and the coupons for oil changes addressed to current resident. I remember Theo sweeping everything into the brown recycling bin while dancing to an 80s playlist. I remember thinking it was sweet that he was doing chores. I asked the question there's only one answer to. Where did the money go? It is a dumb question grammatically. Money doesn't go anywhere by itself, but the verb makes me feel like the dough could still choose me. A cashier's check, he says. Issued to a dealership in your city. For a 2022 Audi, I believe. He says Audi like a professor accidentally swearing. He says your city like he can't bear to imagine where I am. I thank him because I am the kind of man who thanks people for lighting the map to my worst moment. I hang up. I stand very still behind the reference desk while a teenager in a NASA hoodie asks me where the manga is and a man murmurs to his newspaper like it's an old enemy. I could have called the police. I could have called a lawyer. I could have called Theo and asked him to meet me at the library so I could make a diagram of betrayal in dry erase marker. What I do is text, "Where are you?" He replies with a photo of a steering wheel. "Isn't she gorgeous?" he writes. There's a sparkle emoji like the universe needs glitter to forgive him. I leave work early with the support of co-workers who love me enough to pretend they think I have a dentist appointment. I drive to the address of the photo backdrop, a glass box dealership off the highway where salespeople wear suits the color of newsprint. Theo is there, grinning like the hero of a commercial that forgets to disclose the April. The car is gray and sleek and looks like it would call me sir and mean it. You used my college savings, I say. I say it soft enough that people across the showroom won't know their popcorn is a prop. Our savings, he says, without blinking. And there it is, the magic trick. He saw a we where I drew a line and decided language is a crowbar. He steps closer like proximity can make a point true. Baby, look, you're not even applying to programs until the fall. This was a now or never deal. Enid was dying. I need reliable transportation for gigs. Think of it as an investment in us. I stared at him the way you stare at a person who has recast themselves. There are two kinds of shock, the kind that makes you step forward and the kind that makes your soul sit down. Mine does the latter. You forged my authorization, I say, and he laughs because when you've been charismatic your whole life you can't hear the difference between the sound of doors opening and alarms. I didn't forge anything, he says. I'm on the account. We're married. He touches my arm, his hand is warm, and I want, with the embarrassing loyalty of a dog, to lean into him. I don't. You're so good with money, he says, like that's a compliment that can pay a bill. You'll build it back up in no time. I leave before I say something I can't unsay to a person I once promised to love when neither of us knew how. I sit in my car and shake with a slow, mean tremor. When it stops, I call my bank. I freeze the accounts. I remove authorized users from everything that can be edited. I file the fraud inquiry even though the woman on the phone warns me that spouses are special. They're both the person and the loophole. I call a lawyer whose voicemail message is friendlier than his rate. I call my mother and say, I need you to tell me this isn't my fault, and she does because she is a mother who believes in triage before truth. That night, Theo is at home making steak with the flamboyant guilt of someone who thinks protein is an apology. He sets my plate down like placing an offering before a God he hopes is merciful. We should talk, he says, and I laugh because the phrase has karaoke energy. Everyone thinks they can sing it and almost no one should. I'm returning the car, I say, and he shakes his head the way men do in movies when they've already decided on behalf of you and your future and your credit score. Baby, that's not how it works. It's a contract. It's done. What you did is also a contract, I say. Between trust and theft. I tell him the accounts are frozen. I tell him I talked to a lawyer. I tell him I'm considering police, and I watch him flinch at a word he never thought could belong to him. He pivots because pivoting is his cardio. Okay, he says, palms up like a preacher. Okay. I messed up. I should have asked. I was scared you'd say no. I would have, I say. That's the point of asking. He nods like he is considering that consent exists. Then, God help me, he smiles. We can fix this, he says. This is just a cash flow thing. Short term. Honestly, if you could just spot me the insurance and the first 2 months of payments. It's a sentence so brazen it takes a second to get through customs. You used my college savings for your car, I say very slowly, and you're asking me for more. I'm not asking you, he says. I'm asking us. In that moment, I meet the part of myself that knows the difference between love and the story you tell yourself about love. I stand up from the table. I put on my shoes like I'm building an exit with laces. You have 1 week to sell that car, I say. To unwind it, to undo it, to trade it for anything that doesn't have leather seats and the smell of my future. If, a week from now, you are still paying for that car with my money, I'm leaving. Leaving where, he asks, like I can't go anywhere that isn't within his narrative of me. Leaving you, I say. My voice isn't loud, it's made of iron. And if you ever again touch money with my name on it without my permission, I will turn the outrage I've been saving for politicians and unsafe crosswalks toward you, and it will not be a feeling you can charm. He tries everything he knows, the puppy eyes, the hands at my waist, the story about his father who gambled his childhood into a ghost and how he swore he'd never be that man. I'm not a gambler, he says. I'm bad at waiting. I need to feel like things are happening. Things are happening, I say. They're just not happening to your benefit right now. Sleep is a rumor in our apartment that night. I lie awake rehearsing the inventory of what's mine, my toothbrush, the library tote with the pin Lena gave me that says ask me about the Dewey Decimal System seriously, the teapot with the chipped spout, the spine that remembers how to hold me up when someone else won't. In the morning he texts lunch as if our conversation was a sitcom cliffhanger. I reply with the name of a diner I love because they've never once put guilt on a plate. He arrives late, wearing a hoodie so soft it might be a bribe. You look handsome, he says. I say nothing and order eggs like it's my job. He waits until the waitress leaves and then slides a folded stack of papers across the table. Trade-in documents, he says. The car is gone. I unfold the pages like they might bite. He is telling the truth. He sold it back at a loss, of course, but the money is returning minus a chunk that feels like a tax on Navit. I'll take a beta, he says. I'll skateboard. I'll Uber. He stops talking when he sees my face. I am crying not because he did the right thing but because he thought doing the right thing would reset us to zero. I'm still leaving, I say. Because doing the right thing under threat isn't the same as being right. He folds, he yells, he begs, he strategizes, he tells me he'll change, he tells me he already has, he tells me it was just money, he tells me that if I loved him I'd stay. If you loved me, I say, you would have asked. The next week is a choreography of logistics and sorrow. I find a sublet above a florist where the hall always smells like apology and weddings. I move my books, my mugs, my mattress, one cab at a time with Lena's help and her Honda that has outlived marriages and 2 sets of brakes. Theo helps for the first hour and then sits on the stoop because watching me carry my future looks harder than lifting it. He texts me at midnight, I'm sorry. At 1, I hate myself. At 2, I don't know who I am without you. I mute the thread because the man he needs to say those sentences to is himself. People will want to know what happened next, as if the end of a marriage is a finish line with a ribbon. The bureaucratic answer is, I called the bank enough times that my name put a hush in their voices. I filed the forms, I watched my credit report like you watch a sick friend sleep. I saved again harder. I filed for separation and then divorce. He kept the moped and the scar. I kept the kettle. The human answer. I learned that love is not a monastery where vows alone make you safe. It is a house with doors that need locks and windows you open when you want air and close when a storm keeps insisting it is the same as breeze. I learned that being good with money also means being good with boundaries. No shared accounts without shared spreadsheets, no we that erases me, no romance that talks to me like a bank robber with a bouquet. I learned that forgiveness can arrive like a cat on its own time, rubbing your ankles when you are finally doing the dishes. I learned that I'm still going back to school just a little later with a story about resilience that no personal statement will ask for but every professor will recognize. Months from the car and the bank and the cricket pen, I stand in line at the coffee shop near campus around the corner from the florist. A kid in a sweatshirt with the university crest is talking to his friend about something that sounds like fear and hope in equal measure. I realize my mouth is smiling without permission. I realize I am the age I was supposed to be when I did this if life had gone to plan. I realize plans are less maps and more recipes that invite improvisation. My phone buzzes. It's a notification from the savings account, deposit received. I look at the number, smaller than before, still respectable, undeniably mine, and I laugh in the middle of the coffee shop like the kind of man who has finally learned to keep a promise to himself. The barista calls my name. I pick up my drink and step out into air that is doing its best impression of spring. On the walk home, I pass a dealership. There's a car in the window, silver, smug. For a second, my stomach tenses the way it did in the showroom, like there's a ghost of a hand at my wallet. But then a bus goes by, loud and generous, filled with people who got where they're going today without owning anything that could steal from someone they love. I wave at the bus like it's a small miracle. Maybe it is. When I reach my stairs, I stop and look up at my window, third floor, light on because I forgot to turn it off and somehow I'm not sorry. Inside, there's a desk I assembled with a tiny Allen wrench and a willingness to try again. There's a stack of application printouts, a highlighter bleeding optimism onto paragraphs about prerequisites and research interests. There's a teapot with a chipped spout that pours exactly as much as I need. I unlock my door. I put the kettle on. I open my laptop and begin typing an essay about the day a bank taught me the difference between authorization and consent, about how the second one is the only one that protects anything that matters. I write about quiet promises and louder boundaries. I write about a car that tried to be the hero and instead became the evidence. I write about how when people ask me what happened, I say, he spent my money, I spent my denial, and then finally I spent a night alone and woke up better. A breeze sneaks in through the window and moves the corner of my application. I hold it down with the snow globe my grandmother gave me the day I got my first library job, a little glass world where the flakes keep falling and the tiny house inside is steady, lights on, the door always locked unless the right person knocks.